about what it's like to be a humanities and arts student, or what it was like to be in the program, but to represent the students. And so at this time, I'd like to have Robert Summers-Berger come to the stage. And while he's on his way up, I want to tell you, I only have just a little bit of trepidation about what he's going to say. By the way, someone needs to video this and upload it onto YouTube.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, let's chat. Before I get into the meat of this speech, I first have thank yous. Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah.
To dole out. The first one, to my mother and father, Elise Summers and Michael Berger. You wish your parents were as cool as mine. They are my proofreaders and my creative consultants, and best of all, just good, supportive folks. Also, to Ms. Hansen for actually letting me make an SIP and not throwing the results when you guys voted me up here. And of course, to my H&A class for sharing this experience with me and not excommunicating me for my frequent class disruption and my regular, unsolicited, didactic homilies on what separates a good flag from a bad one. Speaking of, actually much to my dismay and likely your relief, Miss Hansen strongly recommended that this speech not be about flags. So funny, I get it. Nobody wants me to talk about flags for 10 minutes. The question remains then, if not flags, what will this speech be about? Well, what you're now hearing is actually my third attempt at writing this thing. You see, my first attempt was a very serious rumination on what it means to create art. After reading it over many times, I thought to myself, who cares? The second attempt was a long recollection of my favorite memories here. After reading it over many times, I thought to myself, cute, but who cares? And then it came to my third try, and I started writing, and I received the writer's block so common among students of the humanities and arts. And finally, in my frustration, I was left asking myself, what's the point? And then, it was as though the muse began to whisper in my ear. That question, what's the point? I kept hearing it over and over in my head. I think the reason asking myself what the point is struck such a chord with me, my voice just cracked in front of like all of you, struck such a chord with me, is that it gets to the heart of what it means to be a student of the humanities and arts. Those fields help us understand what it is to think and feel. Thus, H&A students have existential crises as spiders spin webs and as snakes slither. It is in our nature. Some information for the parents who may be wondering what I mean. Well, my peers and I just spent 4 years in a program characterized by the projects it gave us. In our junior year, we completed a project about a spelling bee, then a project about mental disorders, then a project about art forms. Then we began work on our senior independent projects, and were given another project in which we discussed plans for that SIP. Yes, a project about a project. In the course of these trials, we returned again and again to that question, what's the point? Will Sarah be better off for knowing every detail of Russia's investment policies? Will Mark be better off for knowing the history of autism in film? Will I be better off for knowing the difference between phonetic acquisition and semantic acquisition? Honestly, what's it all for? Well, I believe the answer to this question begins with the boss. Miss Hanson is one heck of a woman. She is smart and helpful and a sharp dresser. So when we were introduced to her, we felt safe in the idea that she'd be guiding us through our 4 years here. And while her expectations of us were great, and at times those expectations even felt lofty beyond reasonability, she answered every question, talked after every class, and sat me next to Isha Mittal every day. So how does this help us answer our question? Well, Miss Hanson is emblematic of all educators involved in the humanities and arts here at Wootton, an incredible intellect with a caring disposition. So what's the point? We are here to meet role models. However, I think our answer to that question is only partial at this point. Indeed, the merit of the H&A program extends beyond people power. It's also about experience. My favorite example of the humanities experience happened in the 9th grade. In Mr. Lowe's Honors English 9 class, an actor from the Folger Shakespeare Company brought in 2 French rapier swords and asked the class, who wants a turn learning to fight like in Romeo and Juliet? My arm shot up so fast it hurt my elbow. I admit this experience was a tad bittersweet because even though I had several years of actual fencing training, my partner, Abigail Russ, was much better at it than me. I concealed my shame by criticizing her foot stance, which also happened to be much better than mine. I digress. This experience with the Shakespeare Company is indicative of the humanities program's uncanny ability to make learning freaking awesome. Everybody reads Romeo and Juliet. Very few get to do so while holding an F-wording sword. And the fun was not limited to sword fighting Abigail Russ. Every student sitting here right now remembers the hours lost in UMD's library, in the Bohemian Rhapsody sing-alongs, in the late-night sessions in the H&A group chat. So what's the point? We joined the H&A program for the quality of its experiential learning. Okay, we've covered the quality of humanities and arts staff and the power of the arts education experience. I think the answer to the question of what the point is missing one final factor. The building of personhood. What do I mean by this? Well, I refer us back to what I said at the outset of this speech. The humanities and arts help us understand what it is to think and feel, what it is to be a person. And indeed, I feel that the student I've become, the one who loves reading about art history and discussing Freud's methodology, and arguing over whether or not Henry VIII really loved Catherine Parr, is who he is today because the program guided him toward the study of human creation. And I promise this is not unique to me. Students, ask yourselves, am I glad Miss Hanson pushed us as hard as she did? Do I enjoy the spirit of collaboration shared by the students? Am I thankful for the friendships forged in the fever heat of last-minute SIP section writing? Realizing the answer to these questions is yes. All of you should be sure beyond doubting that the person you are now is the product of the arts and humanities. So what's the point? We joined the H&A program to develop ourselves and do, what we love. There you have it. The point of our work here is to fulfill our nature, as spiders spin webs and as snakes slither, with mentors whose insight is invaluable. Miss Hanson is one heck of a woman, and with memorable experiences that make learning freaking awesome. Thank you.